Disclaimer: I do not own the rights of any of the videos, images, or sounds other than my own voice that will be portrayed in this video. Everything you will see is for documentary purposes only and is protected under the Fair Use Act of 1976. Nintendo, Atari, Sega. Only a few names most think of when it comes to the history of what we know as video games. The many interesting controversies and historical events of the video game world have led it away from the brainless, time-wasting stigma it held in its early years. It has become a dominating industry with astounding accomplishments. People went from using it as a pastime to making full careers out of gaming. There are certain games that even have high-stakes tournaments held on grand levels, in the same realms as boxing or other sport entertainment events. Conventions are held every year to celebrate the gaming world and to see what the future will bring for the players. Whether it be PC, console, vintage arcade, or even mobile, there is no way to avoid the video game world in some capacity in today's age. Some video game franchises become so popular, they branch off into other media, comic books, novels, toys, memorabilia, encyclopedias regarding the lore, board games, and of course, movie adaptations.
I'm Sonic, a little ball of super energy in an extremely handsome package.
The video game film world is smaller than you think, with less than 50 live-action films having been released, which includes multiple sequels to certain series. The film that started it all was the infamous Super Mario Bros. From 1993. 30 years with around 44 adaptations in the time span is not a lot, especially considering that half of that number is just within the last decade. Although the future does look brighter, as there are over 30 adaptations planned for various games. The biggest problem with this form of interpretation for video games is how hit or miss it becomes, and you'll never know until it's too late. The most successful video game movie so far is 2019's Pokemon Detective Pikachu, having an outstanding $450 million box office run on only a $150 million budget. It beat out the previous holder, Warcraft, from 2016, an adaptation of the popular MMO World of Warcraft, making just shy of $440 million on a $160 million budget. But success isn't always driven with the profit, it's also about the reception. Though the majority of films are successful financially, they are still riddled with poor reviews and poor audience reactions. One of the biggest culprits would be the Resident Evil franchise. Based on the popular survival horror game of the same name, there is an initial 6-film series released from 2002 to 2017. And although the franchise as a whole has garnered over $1 billion in the box office, the reviews are barely mid to mostly low. Using Rotten Tomatoes standards, Resident Evil Apocalypse has the lowest critic score of the series, with the highest of the series being the final chapter, and even that's not that flattering. And this is just one example of the many that have not been taken well. And that's not to say that this endeavor into adapting these stories into film had a great start in its journey either. I brought up Super Mario Bros. From '93 as it is the first video game adaptation ever, and by the standards of the video game it's adapting, it's extremely bad. Financially, it bombed. Critically, it bombed. It is probably the worst way to start off what would lead the future of video game movies. However, it's picked up its own cult following and has been labeled with the "it's so bad it's good" status. And considering the other films that built that foundation, it's definitely one of the better ones. Over a 3-year period from 1993 to 1995, 4 video game adaptations were released under 4 different distribution paths. Super Mario Bros. Was produced by Hollywood Pictures and distributed by Buena Vista Pictures. The following year, Double Dragon was released, produced by Imperial Entertainment and distributed by Gramercy Pictures. Barely a month apart, you would see Street Fighter get released, produced by Capcom and distributed by Universal Pictures. Lastly, the phenomenon that is 1995's Mortal Kombat was released, produced by Threshold Entertainment and distributed by New Line Cinema. Mortal Kombat is the most successful of these 4 films, and of this decade when it comes to the video game adaptation. With a $20 million budget, It made over $122 million. It was a prime example that these films can be successful, even though it wasn't the first one. The production process for this film also led to many techniques that were not used before it. For example, it's the first American film to use wires to balance actors for special fight sequences, what is called wire fu. This might have been a technique from Chinese martial arts films, but Robin Shou, the actor who played Liu Kang, brought it into the process for making Mortal Kombat, and the rest is history. Throughout the 90s, there were 6 total video game adaptations made, the other 2 being the Mortal Kombat sequel, Annihilation, which bombed and is ridiculed to this day. Lastly, it was Wing Commander from 1999, which is a lesser-known movie to many. And out of these 6 films, one had done worse than the rest. And it isn't Super Mario Bros. It's also not Mortal Kombat Annihilation. Unfortunately, the worst video game film of the 90s is Double Dragon from 1994. Why is it worse than any of the others? Here are some of the smaller reasons. Each other film has had some other iteration or redemption years after the fact. 2023's The Super Mario Bros. Movie, though an animation, was vastly more successful than any iteration of the game put together. 2021's Mortal Kombat adaptation, though isn't as financially successful as its 1995 predecessor, its critical response among fans and viewers have led it to being considered the best of the series so far. Enough so that a sequel is being worked on. Street Fighter has only had one other live-action attempt made in 2009 with The Legend of Chun-Li, which was another failure. But the franchise is still going strong with animated films, cartoons, and animes, and it's still so popular that Legendary Entertainment has another film in mind, hoping to get the writer and director team of Danny and Michael Philippou to make it. These were the same guys that wrote and directed Talk to Me, a paranormal horror film from this year. The only film with no redemption arc, no comeback story, is Double Dragon. Despite Wing Commander being just as bad, it's not as big of a video game franchise as Double Dragon is. Double Dragon has more games than most others that receive adaptation, and this one film has sort of been left in the 90s with no mention of anything moving forward. Stray is a game that came out in 2022, and as of September 2023, an animation movie is in the works. One game. As of this recording, Double Dragon has 13 games, and it sometimes feels like it gets no attention outside of what it's already been given. It has a short 6-issue comic book run for Marvel in 1991. There was a syndicated cartoon that ran for 26 episodes from 93 to 94, and that's it. No rumors or talks of trying to do anything else with the franchise. Why? Why has no one wanted to give this a chance? One may ask, is it because of how bad the 1994 adaptation is? And one might answer, that is completely possible. Simply put, the film was a tremendous letdown for fans. It does nothing to drag any true fan into it, especially when trying to make the story a completely different concept that drives any real fan away from it. The game is about playing as one of the Lee brothers, or both if you had 2 controllers and a friend. You fight your way through multiple stages and bosses to save a general love interest. The gang you fight are known as the Shadow Warriors, which have been the essential common villain in the series. There's also very little deviation from this formula, as Double Dragon is known as a beat-em-up style game. Whether side-scrolling or 3D, this is the premise of these games. Beat the gang and save the day. Does the movie attempt to capture that? No. It is set in a post-apocalyptic 2007 where the brothers play Catch Me If You Can with the other half of an all-powerful dragon medallion, while avoiding a stylistic crime boss who wants the dragon medallion for evil. Perhaps a decent concept, but its execution is terrible. The action is subpar, especially for someone of Mark Dacascos's caliber. There is nothing that allows it to capture a Double Dragon fan. It also stars Scott Wolf, Alyssa Milano, and Robert Patrick. Patrick has stated that, on paper, I thought it could really work. It didn't really work that well. There's some funny aspects to the character, and it was a fairly liberating experience to be funny and try to be menacing at the same time. I am proud of my performance. Critics have said it was clumsily paced, amateurishly acted, The New York Times said, a movie of frantic action and clever special effects with jumpy nonstop energy that overrides the script's incongruities and the amateurish performances. A compliment slapped with an insult. Double Dragon's clever use of special effects cannot mask the film's overly simplistic storyline and cheesy dialogue. Won't satisfy even the most fervent of fans. It is third on this list from a 2008 article in the Times, the top 10 worst video game movies of all time. The failure of this film might have been the unofficial nail in the coffin for any attempts made to give Double Dragon another chance. But the night is darkest before the dawn, and a resurgence of interest might change the fate of this franchise. In 2019, MVD Entertainment Group released the film on Blu-ray, and it sold enough copies to garner $1.3 million in sales by the end of 2020. The reviews for it now see viewers returning to the film for the nostalgic feel. The quality is there, but it's not because of its interpretation of the story, but for being fun, entertaining, and a reminder of simpler times when movies were made with less scrutiny, or at least tried to be a bit more experimental. It's allowed a community to come forth to show its appreciation for this film. Maybe this is what Double Dragon needed. 30 years later, it is getting some attention, hyping up dark spots in the community where this movie laid forgotten and overshadowed by the failures of others, while also failing itself and its fans. Maybe now, someone will try to push forward with something else for these fans. Double Dragon is a fun gaming experience, and one day, maybe not tomorrow, but one day, it will be more. The hope for it to be given another chance in the spotlight may come to fruition. Until that day, we still have this film in all of its embarrassing glory.
Oh, shit. You said it.
Destiny has brought together the Double Dragons. Guard them, as I guarded you.
We don't really have to wear these, do we? Oh, man, these are great. Can't buy suits like this off the rack. Of course, I don't have to wear the blue one.
What's wrong with the blue one?